I'm excited to be here. We do everything from scratch, which is very rare in the bakery. We use King Arthur flour, which is one of the only flours that can be exported out of the United States. We get our butter from a dairy farm in Green Lake, Wisconsin, which is a European-style butter, so there's less water in it than regular butter. And our chocolate is Callebaut, which is Belgium. And so we try to use really, really good ingredients. I think doing those little details is what makes the products really good. We even do our donuts from scratch, which is why you really like them. So I'm excited when people are enjoying what we're doing. We've been there for 9 months, so we're a baby business. We opened up to road construction, so that was fun. And so I'm excited to be here and to show everyone one of my favorite desserts to make at the holidays. I was really trying to decide what to do, and I thought, oh, I could do like some kind of pastry Olympics and do this cake boss thing, and you can all go wow. But then I thought, you know what, we're going to do something that all of you are going to be able to go home and make this. And those mushrooms are like meringue mushrooms. They're not like an actual real mushroom that I put on there, so you're going to learn how to make those too. So. And then we're doing we're going to raffle the one off that we make, so you have to check out your cookbooks. I always think it's really neat. My first job was putting books back on a shelf in a library when I was 16 years old. And the biggest way that I learned how to bake was just from reading cookbooks. I started back in the 80s just reading cookbooks. I had moved to Madison. I was engaged at the time. My family is from the Chicago area and from down south. And so we had moved here, and my husband and I weren't married yet, so I was living in my own apartment and everything, and I didn't know anybody, so that's what I did. I started cake decorating. I did an at-home Wilton study, and I got really good at cake decorating, and then my husband's cousin worked at the Ovens of Brittany, and so then I did her wedding cake, and the Ovens of Brittany people were there, and then I learned how, I said, well, I don't know how to bake. I can, make it out of a box and I can decorate it. And she said, that you have the hard part down. And so I did learn how to bake. I would say I'm grandma trained, but it was not my actual grandma. It was the owner of Ovens of Brittany's mother-in-law. And so that's where I learned how to bake, and her and I stayed really good friends right up until she passed away a couple years ago. But I always called her my baker mama. So I had all these different moms, and she's my baker mama. And so I love passing on and sharing. And I always think of culinary arts is deciding who do you allow to influence yourself. As you know, like so many chefs and bakers have so many different styles, and I believe it's who you're allowed to be influenced from. And that's why it's just so different and unique. So I think of all the different cookbooks that I've read and the different places that I've worked and the different bakers that I've worked with that has kind of created my own style. And all of you will create your own style. And so I really hope that I can maybe help influence you a little bit. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to first review the recipe, because we were not going to be able to be here for 5 hours while we're baking things and letting them cool. So I took a little bit of a shortcut, and this is the actual recipe. I did not hold back. You are really going to be able to make this. And this recipe, there is no flour in it, so it is actually gluten-free. That's extra exciting. So the first thing that we're doing, I'm just going to go through how I make the cake, just so that you know the mixing process. So what I do first is, especially if I'm in my home, I do the 8 egg whites first. So you're going to separate your eggs. You don't ever want to get the egg yolk in the whites, because then you're going to have to throw the whole thing out, because your egg whites aren't going to whip up. So you have to be really careful. What I do sometimes is I'll do one at a time and then put it in, so that if I would mess up one egg, I didn't just mess up my whole little pile of eggs that I'm getting the egg whites from. So you're going to do your egg whites, and I whip those up first and then set them aside, because most of you only have one mixing bowl at home. And so set that aside in another bowl, and just go ahead and throw your egg yolks right in that same bowl, and you don't have to rewash it. It's going to be fine. And you're going to whip those egg yolks until they get really yellow. And then we have our powdered sugar. And you're going to sift that powdered sugar and then add it to the egg yolks and just keep whipping it. And you're going to see that color. It's just going to really turn a light yellow. And then you're going to have your cocoa powder, and you should sift the cocoa powder. And then add the salt, and you're going to do that. So now you have this chocolatey mixture in your mixing bowl. And now you have your egg whites in another bowl. And you're going to put like half that egg white mixture with a spatula and just stir it in that chocolate part. And it's going to kind of lighten up and turn a different color. And then you're going to add the other half of that egg whites, and you're going to hand stir it with your spatula. So once you have the chocolate part mixed up, everything you're going to do by hand. And you,
I have a question.
yep.
And if you have a question as we're going through this, I think it's okay if they ask.
Yeah.
When you say cocoa powder, is there a particular kind they should use?
Well, the darker the cocoa powder, the better. We use a Calibo cocoa powder. You know, in the grocery store, I'm not sure what brand is really out there that's going to be real exciting. I think the cocoa powder, you might want to go try and find it at like Orange Tree Imports or something, or go online and get a really good brand. I feel the chocolate makes a difference. You know, Hershey's it'll still be good. One of the really good chocolate brands that I like that's in the store is Ghirardelli, but I do not think they have a cocoa powder out yet. If you want to come and buy some cocoa powder off us, I'm sure we could hook you up. But yeah, the cocoa powder, I should have brought some. It's actually a really dark cocoa powder, and there's such a difference when you, that was an excellent question. I didn't even think about bringing the different cocoa powders and showing, just looking at the colors of the cocoa powder, and we love to use that really nice dark. It's a Calibo, it's from Belgium. It makes such a difference in our chocolate cake, and that's what is in our Yule log. So then what we're going to do is you're going to have like your jelly roll pan. And what you're going to do, this is just like a parchment paper that I rolled it in, and you can also use wax paper. I'm pretty sure they do sell parchment paper in the stores, but also they sell the wax paper. So the first thing you do is you spray your pan, and then you put your parchment paper down, and then spray it again. And that's how you're going to prepare your pan. And then you're going to put your mixture that you just whipped up on here. Now, every oven is different. And so what I did with this, because I have a commercial oven, I was able to bake it in 13 minutes. And so someone had asked me earlier, how do you know when it's ready? Because you don't want to overbake your jelly roll. It's a toothpick's going to come out dry. I always say, do your timer for less time and just keep adding a few minutes at a time than to try and guess, oh, maybe 10 more minutes. Because if you get too many minutes out, you've wrecked it. And so once it's done, so I'm going to guess in a home oven, you might go maybe like 18 minutes. So I would do like 10 minutes, and then I would spin it. I'm always spinning stuff because you always have those hot spots in your home ovens, and just kind of keep checking it with a toothpick. And as soon as it's ready, you're going to pull it out. And it's not going to take long to bake because it's really, really thin. You're going to pull it out. You're going to run a knife around the edge, and you're going to flip it out right away. I had to flip it out on parchment just because I didn't have like a nice tea towel at the bakery. You know, it's kind of more commercial. So I flipped it out on the parchment, but at home I usually use like those tea towels, but not anything with the fuzzy in it, or the fuzzy will get on your chocolate. I've learned all this the hard way. And so, so now we're going to let it cool just like this. And so you can, mass produce these and just start, baking off all these little logs, because you're going to make a whole bunch of these as Christmas presents for all your friends. I've done that before. And so now we're going to assemble it. Okay, any questions so far on baking it? And yes?
Wouldn't the wax paper stick to it?
It shouldn't, because you've sprayed the stuff. So you're spraying the pan, and then you spray the stuff again on top of the wax paper.
I'm talking about the wax paper stick to the cake.
Oh, that's an excellent question. Yep, when I flip it out, I pull that off, and then I roll it up in this. So I'm flipping it out onto like a tea cloth or something, and then I pull the paper that was on the pan, I pull that off. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, it wouldn't melt on it, but I think getting it off right away when the cake is still hot is going to be the easiest. And there's going to be a lot of the cake that's going to be stuck on that paper, and it's okay. You didn't mess up. That just happens. You just maybe, scrape that part or eat it. So now we've got our cake all cooled, and one of the secrets to the jelly roll is it has cooled in this shape. And I'm going to do an Italian meringue buttercream, but there's recipes for that out there. That's a kind of real advanced sort of a European frosting. You need a candy thermometer to make it and everything. I think you're going to be just fine if you want to go ahead and just whip up some fresh cream and lightly, add some powdered sugar and sweeten it. And so we're just going to fill so I have my buttercream here, and we're just going to fill it.
Is that cake about half inch?
I would say, yeah. And this is the exact recipe that you guys have, and that's what you made. And I baked it in this pan, or that size pan there. And I'm just going to put that in. And you can do all sorts of flavors of this. You don't have to do, vanilla. People can do like coffee or chocolate or raspberry. You can just do all kinds of stuff and just be real creative. Yes? You sure can. Yeah, I think that would be really good. Yes.
So you put like a lot of it, and then also, do you like butter whipped cream more than you like other whipped cream? Like creams in there for that? Or?
Yeah, I prefer butter whipped cream. I don't like sometimes like the Crisco. There's a lot of recipes out there that use like Criscos and lards, and I just feel like they kind of feel like greasy in your mouth. So I like doing more of a butter. But this is a European buttercream. You need a candy thermometer to make it. It's called Italian meringue. There's also recipes out there for Swiss meringue, and they're very frustrating to make. I remember when I was first learning how to make them, and of course I learned it out of the Cake Bible, was the book, and I messed it up a ton. And now it's really easy, and it's the easiest thing. It actually, food cost wise, it actually is cheaper to make than like a butter powdered sugar frosting. But you just have to really know how to do them. So I'm smearing the frosting in here. And it's almost like a giant ho-ho. So that's kind of what you're thinking. And there's really no certain amount of filling to put in there. I learned this working at one of the bakeries, and they use this spatula instead of like those long thin ones. And I actually have learned that is a really fun tip. Every baker uses a different tool. We have several other bakers that work at the bakery and some very talented cake decorators, and everyone has their certain spatula that they like and that they work with. So there's no perfect spatula out there to use, but you just kind of play around, and we're always trying to get the sides of our cake as smooth as possible when we're frosting. We do wedding cakes and stuff over there, and always trying to make everything as perfect as we can. All right. I think it does change with the season. What surprises me is what most people like to order. Over here on the east side, everyone likes their traditional cake. They like chocolate or they like vanilla. And people don't like it, green tea or, anything too out there. And so it's very easy to help people pick their cake flavors. Because we do everything from scratch, we can do all kinds of crazy flavors. If you have a special recipe that you want us to do for you, we can do that too. So now I'm going to roll it up. So I'm going to take this edge, and just kind of turn it around. There we go. And so I'm just taking it here, and I'm just going to start rolling it. And as I'm rolling it, I'm pulling this other piece of parchment off, which also can be like your dish towel. And just kind of use this to kind of help roll it up. And it's okay. See, I'm losing a lot of chocolate. You didn't mess anything up. And there we go.
Can I ask, is it needful to have either the frosting go all the way to the edge or to have it offset like a quarter of an inch? Or does it matter?
Usually what we find that we're always trimming that edge off, and so I never take it all the way to the end. It's just a habit. It's just my personal preference. But there's really no right or wrong way if you take it all the way to the end. It's usually never perfectly. You can kind of tell. It's just not perfect, And so yeah, I always say. The baker, that you've arrived as a baker is you've messed up the most. And so I have messed up so often. And when you can fix your mess ups, then that's what's really cool. So we're going to use some of this. So we're going to cut, this is the secret to get it to look like the log. It's all about how we're going to cut it. So I'm just going to cut a little angle like so. And that's the one that you eat. And then we're going to cut our long log that's the long end here. And once again, I'm cutting it at that same angle here, just like so. just real light. You don't have to. And I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to put it right, let's say put it right here. So it's kind of off to the side. Let's see, yep. And then I'm going to do another one, like so. And that's going to be this little part that juts out. So there's my branch. And I'm going to use this for like a knot. So now I'm going to make a little room over here. Let me switch these out. And now we're going to talk about ganache. So ganache is very touchy stuff, and it's chocolate. It really matters what chocolate you do. You can make your ganache in the microwave or on the stovetop, and I have the recipe there. So you're going to heat your cream. And the secret is you want to get it to a scald. If you don't get your cream heated up enough, your whole ganache is wrecked, because even once you add the chocolate and try and heat it and save it, it's not going to turn out. Yeah?
How do you talk like the real chocolate chips just looking at the recipe here?
Usually you want to, when you purchase your chocolate chips, you want to read the ingredient label. If it says imitation chocolate flavored chips, or if it says chocolate bark, that's not going to work, because there's too much wax in that product, and it's not going to set up like a ganache, like what you see on here. So it should say on the ingredient labels, real.
Would Nestle chocolate chips work?
They sure would. That's a good one. My favorite in-store brand is the Ghirardelli. It's kind of, Nestle's is a semi-sweet, and a Ghirardelli has more of a bittersweet. It kind of has a little bit more of like a high-end flavor, but Nestle's will definitely work. And I've used it before too. That one you're going to have just a slightly lighter color.
How do you say until it's
Like
skulls? What does that look like?
you're going to see almost like, you'll see a little bit of like the yellow like separate off the fat. So you see maybe a little bit of yellow on the top, and that's okay. And it's going to almost grow like a skin. You don't want it to come to a boil, because if that comes to a boil, it's just going to make a huge mess. So it might just kind of boil right around the edges, and you'll see almost like it's putting a skin on the top. Does everyone like, am I describing that? Kind of like how you get that cream heated up. You can do it on the stovetop or in the microwave. It's going to work either way. And you don't want to walk away from it, because if it overboils, it's a huge mess. So I'm hoping my chocolate is the right temp. I think it is. I think we can pull this off. We have a microwave down here just in case. So the one thing with working with ganache is it's going to set up really hard, and when you try this sample, you'll see. So this, I warmed it up before I came over here, and I was hoping that I would get it to the right spreadable consistency. This can be where your frustration comes from and where you have to have patience. So when you make your ganache, especially when you're doing your Yule log, you might want to even make it the day before, because it's going to take a long time to cool. You can also, if you want to speed up the cool process, put it like in an ice bath, because you need to let it go. I mean, when you make ganache, it'll be very liquidy, and you want the chocolate is like kind of going back, reverting back to that solid form, and you're going to start to get like a spreadable. So this is a spreadable consistency right now. It's maybe just a touch thicker than I would have wanted, but I'm going to make this work, because what can happen is if I go to the microwave and warm it up, and I go even just a few seconds over, we might be having to wait like 20 minutes for it to get back to the right consistency to make it work. So don't be frustrated with your chocolate. You just have to have patience, and it's going to be okay. So we're going to put our chocolate on here.
The ganache the day before. Can you leave it out at room temperature, or should it be in the fridge?
You sure can leave it out at room temperature, because what it is, sugar is a preservative. What this is that everyone had like a chocolate truffle. This is the filling of a chocolate truffle. You can flavor this too. They have like flavor oils. Like you can real lightly even add a little bit of liqueur, but you might want to back your cream out a little bit, because you don't want to get too much liquid in there, but if you want to like back like a fourth a cup out and add like a Bailey's Irish Cream or a Kahlua or something like that, you can really flavor up your chocolate and do all kinds of fun things with your Yule logs. So we got our ganache, and now we're just frosting this. And this is where you can get just really fancy with your Yule log. Go, do a really cool filling, like an espresso filling, and a Kahlua of ganache, all kinds of stuff. I had a job at Sun Porch Cafe, and we were making them, I was the weekend baker, and we started making them there. And one of the bakers that I really learned a lot from, her name is Sylvia Tim, and her and I are still really good friends. And we go to the cake decorator convention, and we're always roommates together. So she taught me how to do the Yule logs there. I can't remember what recipes we were doing there because I never took any recipes from the places that I worked. So these recipes I researched myself, and I found this log. The log recipe, I believe, I found in I have a volume of Bon Appetit from like the 70s. And I think it was in there where I found that chocolate sponge cake. Speaking of cookbooks, there's such treasures in the cookbooks. I love finding the old ones because they'll have stories behind the recipes. And there's just some treasures. Sometimes some of the cookbooks, they want you to use some weird product that's out there. They didn't have all that stuff, back long ago. So if you want to just make it real, you just find these just older cookbooks. And I'm sure you have the old cookbooks here at the library. Some of the cookbooks that were like from other countries, I have a German cookbook that was like translated into English. I have found some really cool cookbooks at like thrift shops and stuff. And for me, a real old cookbook is a treasure because I love hearing the stories. The story behind the Yule log is they used to light a Yule log for, they called it the winter solstice, which then they started coinciding with Christmas and New Year's. So they would light this, they called it the Yule log, and they would decorate this log that was going to be in front of their fireplace. And then in the 1800s, a French pastry chef decided to turn that Yule log into a dessert. So they call it a bûche de Noël, and we call it a Yule log in English, but both are the same things. And so this was invented in France. And they're known to do it in all different flavors. The first one was a yellow cake with a chocolate filling, is what I have found out. But, this one's more chocolatey. Really? Yeah. Thank you. So I'm just getting my chocolate on there. And you know what? You don't have to get this really smooth because it's okay. I'm going to show you a trick. I'm just trying to make sure I have it all covered. To keep a cake from drying out, you really want to get those edges. See, underneath there, I want to make sure I get those edges because if I was going to, not eat this for a day or two, I don't want air getting in there and turning it dry because that would be bad, all that work, and then you get kind of a dry cake. And so you just want to kind of get those edges down there, and you can decorate these in all kinds of fun ways. If you go online, you just kind of like hit in the Google bar and put like Yule log and hit images, and you can just get so many ideas of stuff. And kids can decorate the Yule logs and just all kinds of fun stuff. Okay, so I'm making sure that you can still see my branch here. When I frost, you can always add more and then you wipe it off as you're finishing up. So there, and now I'm going to come back and I'm going to grab this. Let me trim this again. So I'm giving it another little trim here, trimming that end off. And this is my little knot. So I'm going to put that right there. And now I have to frost my knot. Did I miss? Oh. I will have to spin that around and look. I feel like I'm frosting upside down, so everyone can see.
Can you freeze this?
You know what? I'm going to be honest. I don't think I've ever frozen one, but I don't see why not, because there's really no fruit or anything. The one danger that can happen when you freeze stuff, and especially this kind of a cake, there's not a lot of fat in this, is that it could dry out, but you have so much other, you know, the fillings and the ganache that it should, you know, I don't know. I would have to do an experiment. I've always made them fresh, so I've never frozen one. But I wouldn't see why not. As long as, I know when I do freeze stuff, you want to double wrap it. Wrap it in saran and then wrap it in foil, just to really make sure that it doesn't like freeze and then thaw, and get it in a good freeze. Any more questions while I'm finishing up the frosting here? Yeah. Okay, so I've almost got it all frosted. And so I'll bring it around, and I'm just going to frost this back part here. Woo. So there's what we got so far. Thank you. Oh. Oh, do I have a hold? I'm going to have to fix that. Thank you. That is an excellent question. Did I miss some spot? Okay, I'm going to turn it around and make sure I don't miss anything, because someone's going to win this one. That's an excellent question. What I do is, as I'm frosting, I put like a bigger pile of frosting on, and I try to say, like, it's like, think of it as like your wave, you know? You try and stay on top of that wave, because the minute that your frosting hits the cake, or your spatula hits the cake part, now you're going to have crumbs in your frosting. And it just, you know, I take for granted that I can do it. I've been working in bakeries for over 20 years. So, but yeah, I remember the frustrations of all that kind of stuff. I've messed up and been frustrated so many times. Yes?
Is there a substitute you could use for cream and tartar? Because I saw that's one of the ingredients.
You could just not use it at all, and it will be fine. Yeah, if you don't have any cream of tartar, it'll be all right. Cream of tartar kind of holds that egg white just a little bit better to hold your meringue, but if for some reason you don't have any cream of tartar, you'll be just fine. Another way to get your cake smooth is, once you have your frosted on there, you can do, there's two different things. You can do what's called a crumb coat. So your first layer, you know what, you just got a bunch of crumbs in there, and that's just how it's going to be. Put that in your refrigerator, because you're all using butter in your frosting, right? And that frosting's going to set up hard in your refrigerator like a stick of butter. And then you're going to put, it's going to be so hard that when you put a second coat on there, it's going to not lift off, and you're going to be able to cover up all those crumbs. So that's one way to do it. Another way is, if you were really good and you didn't get any crumbs in your frosting, but now you want to get your cake really smooth, you either get hot water or a blowtorch, and you get your spatula. We use blowtorches in the bakery. The first time I saw a baker using a blowtorch, I thought that was so cool. And now, you know, just use the blowtorch. And so you can heat up that spatula really hot with the blowtorch, or with hot water, and then go over that cake again. Depending, you know, the blowtorch is going to be, you don't want any water on your product at all. So, okay.
When you make the cake, do you have your eggs like room temperature, or does it matter?
It's better if they're room temperature, but I've been in a hurry and stuff, and just kind of done it too. And also, like, being the health department doesn't like us leaving our eggs at room temperature, even though that's so old school baking. So we pretty much aren't doing that kind of stuff. We're just kind of pulling our eggs out. They come in these big crates. There's like 30 dozen in a box. You pull the box out and you just start mixing. So we're not usually leaving them out a long time. It's old school. It's how it's best. You're going to get a higher whip, but it's against health codes to do that in a commercial place. So we're not making any special extra effort to have any room temperature eggs. And everything seems to work out just fine. All right. Yeah, there's so many, like, sometimes it makes you wonder if, like, I think there's like this recipe writing conspiracy where I think maybe someone's mother-in-law wrote the recipe so that her daughter-in-law, and they might have been, oh, and room temperature eggs, and this, and this, and this, and this, so she can just be like, you know. And, you know, maybe they didn't even need to do all these different extra steps because it usually turns out anyway. Okay, so now I think I have gotten all my little spots. And so now we don't even have to be upset that it's all not smooth because we're making bark. Just a fork. And we're just going to do like this. And we're just scratching it along the surfaces, just like so. And we're just making the bark. So far, everyone thinks this is really easy, right? It is. I always say the baker is only as good as the recipe she is given. And that's what I would say to some bosses when they didn't like what I made. Okay. Okay, so now it's looking like bark, and this was super easy. We just used a fork. And now this is kind of advanced, so it still looks pretty if you don't do this. This is a pastry bag, and it's like a number 18 tip, which is a star tip. It doesn't matter if you don't have a number 18 tip. It's going to be fine. And I'm going to do this little swirl thing, and I'm going to try and do it upside down for you guys. I think I did it. When holding the pastry bag, this is when I've taught cake decorating lessons. This is like the most frustrating thing is holding the pastry bag. So the secret is twist it and hold it in between your thumb and forefinger and just hold on to it. Because what I've seen is this, like, when it starts coming out the top, and everyone's done that. And you want to know what? If it just keeps coming out the top, take a rubber band or a twist tie and just tie it up, and it's gonna be good. A little one here, and I got one back here. All right. So we've got our basic Yule log started. And now we're going to do our mushrooms. So let's talk about the mushrooms. So that recipe is on the back. Oh, yes.
I just have a question. If you don't want to bother getting the tip and the bag, can you use the baggie?
Yeah.
Where you put it in the plastic bag, cut the tip off, and
Yeah, that would really work.
That's a cheater method that would be awesome. The other thing that you can do is even just take a little spatula and just put a little white on there and swirl a fork in there, or leave it plain. You know, you can do whatever you want.
What inspired you to bake?
Gosh, let's see. You know, I started doing cake decorating, and I did a Wilton at-home study, and because I didn't know anyone in Madison, and I was just living in Madison. I was working nights, and my husband-to-be, which now we've been married for 25 years, he was working during the days. I didn't know anybody, so I just sent away. It's Wilton Industries. It's one of the big leading cake decorator. Norman Wilton pretty much like revolutionized cake decorating for, you know, the United States and the American style cake decorating. So it was an at-home study, and I believe that you can still purchase it through Wilton. And they also teach Wilton decorating, I believe, at the Vanilla Bean. That's a really fun store over on Odana Road. And I think they're doing it at Michael's. So you can get some cake decorating lessons there and learn the Wilton methods. And they have all the different tips. And so I just started baking at home. It was like 5 different kits that you'd get sent away. And I would just start reading the books and just, I don't know, I guess it just, and then I got good at it. I wasn't good at it at first because no one ever is good at anything at first. But I just was kind of like always reading about it and trying new things and just really, really fascinated. But then people started asking me for cakes and people started wanting to buy cakes. And it's just like you're doing cakes at your house and you know, it's just kind of getting out of hand. And then the next thing you know, I was a mom. By the time I was on my second one, I already had been doing a wedding cake for my husband's cousin. So I did that wedding cake. And then the Ovens of Brittany people offered me a job when they saw the cake. And I said, well, I don't know how to bake. And then I started baking. And then what was really funny is how I actually started baking was we were doing cheesecakes, and we only had like one flavor of cheesecake at Ovens of Brittany, and they're like, you know, we need this other flavor of cheesecakes. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I got some cookbooks, and I started researching, and I found an amaretto chocolate cheesecake, and then I did it, and it started going over really well. And then someone told me we need a turtle cheesecake. So I go looking through cookbooks, and I can't find a recipe. And so I think to myself, I'm like, oh, I can figure this out myself. And so I started, it was just weird, like just made me think, just think of your own recipe. Kind of take this and alter it and do your own recipe. And so I started writing recipes, and then I was selling them, and our cheesecake sales were going up really good. And so the owner told me to check out ingredients and go home and write cheesecake recipes. And so we won at Isthmus Madison's Best when I was at Ovens of Brittany, and we used to go through tons of cheesecake. And I have a cheesecake recipe that won the Chocolate Gala 5 years straight. It was a turtle cheesecake with Kahlua. And then from there, it just made my brain start thinking, like, you know, I don't have to be limited to what recipe I can find. And I started just kind of learning, like, the secrets of, you know, you have to have this or this. I don't know. I think maybe it was like a little gift that was inside of me that I didn't even know I had. And so reading cookbooks and trying different things, just all of a sudden I was able to do it. And one of my jobs that I did for 4 years, I was in charge of research and development in a wholesale bakery. So I actually learned the science behind baking, and at that job we used all scratch ingredients, but we had to bake into a freezer. So I had to learn, once you freeze a product, the molecules are going to explode. You're going to have a different product than what you had going into it, and how are we still going to have that product be good? And so I really learned a lot of science behind baking. There's a lot of math behind baking, and I never liked science or math when I was in school, but I use it every day, and I can't believe, you know, I do know how many teaspoons and tablespoons are in cups and ounces and convert things to grams, and you just have to know how to do all that every single day. In a scratch bakery, you're batching out recipes. You know, one day you might need 5 of something, and the next day you need 20 of something. You have to take that recipe and expand and contract it, and every day, and just, so it just becomes like second nature. You just need to know all this math. Yes? I don't. You know what? I have a blog. I haven't updated in about 2 years, but I think we're going to try and do it again. And I put some recipes out on that, but it's nothing that exciting. But I had that, and but yeah, that would be fun to write a cookbook. What I love about cookbooks is I love reading the stories and the introductions and just reading about the different people in the cookbooks. And one thing that I learned from The Bread Baker Apprentice, which is a cookbook, Peter Reinhardt, he's an excellent bread baker, and he teaches at a culinary school. When you go to Europe and you're going to be a baker, you have to produce the product the exact way that the master produces it. So if you're going to make a loaf of French bread, it has to be exactly, you have to sit there and reproduce it and make it look the same as the master. What's really neat about the United States is we have so many people from so many different countries. We've come to this country. We're not reproducing what the master makes. We're being influenced by so many different cultures and backgrounds and different recipes, and that's what makes us so unique. And I thought, and Peter wrote that in his cookbook and really described that American baking is such like the fusion of all these cultures coming together, where in Europe they're reproducing the master, and there's no creativity in that. You're just trying to reproduce the master. So that's a big difference between different countries and how they bake. And what we do very unique in the United States by being allowed to be influenced by so many different cultures and different countries and origins of recipes, and just mixing them all up and doing our own thing. Yeah, there's a fun few names. I can mention them real quick while I make some mushrooms here. I love Marcel de Saulniers. He wrote Death by Chocolate. He owns the Trellis and Lebec Fen. He's just, I love his style. I love Rose Larry Berenbaum. She wrote the Cake Bible. I think I saw her Christmas cookie book over there, unless someone checked it out. And then Colette Peters, she's a great decorator. I love Sylvia Weinstock. If you're, if you're a cake decorator of the stars, her wedding cakes cost $50,000, and she's just amazing. And how she does everything from scratch, and just the beautiful work that she does. And yeah, there's just some really neat cookbooks that I would just sit and read like a nerd, like, oh my goodness. Okay, so now we're gonna make mushroom, because this is really cool. These are not like real mushrooms, like someone would think like, ooh, yuck, she put a mushroom on the cake. So we're gonna just review the recipe real quick, because this can be so frustrating. So you got your egg whites going, and then you're going to mix everything together, your cup of, a cup of sugar, and then add your salt and the cream of tartar and like stir that up in your sugar. And then let that egg white get really like foamy, where it's almost like coming together to that peak. And then slowly add the rest of the stuff and add your vanilla. And don't over whip it, because then it will break. I've learned that the hard part too. So then what we're gonna do is we're going to pipe it out of the bag. And you know what? I'm gonna pretend that this is egg white in here, and I'm gonna pipe one out for you. And I'm gonna pipe it on, just to show you guys. I'm gonna pipe it here. So we just have like a round circle, just something round. And this is how we're gonna do the mushroom, the bottom. And we're just, just doing like that. So there's like the bottom, and you can kind of push it down if you don't want that little tight hump. Yes? You can, but you know what I have found? Unless you cut that tip perfect round, you're not gonna get a perfect round. It might be a little frustrating. So yeah, it's hard to get that bag to be a perfect circle when you cut the bag. That's the only thing, but you can do it, but it might not be as good as this. Yeah. And now we're gonna do a stem, so you're just kind of doing like that, and you're just pulling it right up. And it's okay if it like falls over a little bit, because that's what happens, you know what I mean? It's okay. So now, and then what you do is you put it in the oven for, let's see, on the home oven for 225, and or lower. You don't want to go much higher, and bake it. I think, well, it says an hour on the recipe, but I'd always like set the timer for like 30 minutes and check it, just because everyone's oven is different. But basically, you're going to be able to pick it up. So, it's just going to be like almost like one of those meringue cookies. And you can make little cookies with the leftover. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the toothpick that I have to figure out where I put it. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we have our toothpick. And we're just going to do like a little hole in here. So I'm just kind of going like this and just getting a little hole.
When you bake this, do you bake it on like parchment paper or brown paper? Because my mother always made meringue on like meringue shells on brown paper bags.
I have a French slip. It's called a slip hat, and that actually baked these really nice. They're expensive. They're like $30 for like just one, but they're really cool because you can do all kinds of stuff. You can go from freezer to oven, and it looks like plastic, but it can handle all this degree of temperature and nothing sticks to it. That one is my favorite to bake on, but I did bake some of these on parchment also, and they did turn out. The bottoms didn't look as cool. Like, I think the bottom, that looks really cool, but I'm going to cover it with chocolate anyway. But I thought that the slip-at did a really nice job. So I wonder if the brown paper bag is something that's more similar to like that slip-at. It's like a French, something out of France that's kind of like, you have to be pretty into your baking to spend $30 on something like that. You're like, really? Okay, so now I got my hole there, and I'm gonna get my cocoa. You're gonna put it like in a sifter, or because we're also coffee bar, I grabbed this from the espresso bar there, so it was already in there. And then I'm gonna just take my same chocolate. You're going to want a nice thick, and then just put it right in there. Kind of make it look like the bottom of the mushroom because it kind of has like a cool look to it. So I'm putting it in there. And then I've already put that little hole in there. And I'm taking this and I'm just kind of putting it right in there. There's my mushroom. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do these other mushrooms really quick. And then we're going to put the rest of the Yule log together. Now, so far, everyone thinks this is easy.
How big would you make the hole?
You know, there's probably not any like right answer, but let me walk around and I'll show you the hole here. Just enough to be able to put that little. I hadn't made them in a while, and I just thought, well, we got to put something else cool on the Yule log. So then I thought, well, let's make these mushrooms. I made them like once, like years ago. So I did have to practice to nail it. But I wanted to do something fun on our Yule log here. So I'm going to do like 4 of these real quick. And they taste really yummy. They're a ton of work, or I would have bought some for everyone, but I wouldn't have gotten any sleep last night.
Now, can you make these ahead? How much can you do?
Oh, yeah. These are something like it's not old till it's sold, kind of. Oh, yeah. Make these. Don't put them in your refrigerator, though, because that can wreck them. Make them ahead. Make them weeks ahead. The humidity will wreck them, but if you can just keep them dry, if you make them like around Thanksgiving and you want to use them for the Christmas time, as long as they weren't like hitting some moisture, they're going to be totally fine. And it's not like they don't really go bad. It's just kind of it's just because they're so dry. I think it's something to do with like the pH of them, that they're going to be fine for you to get through the holidays. And just make a bunch, put them out on make a bunch of these, put them, and then you just assemble them when you need one, when you need a last minute one. And then put these on your Christmas cookie platters that you make for an extra wow. It doesn't have to go on the Yule log. I've seen them. I read that in the cookbook, Rose Levy-Berenbaum. She makes these. And she added them to her cookie platter, and it would make your cookie platter very unique. Oh, yeah. I bet you could. I think you could make them like all kinds of sizes. All right, so now the fun begins. So because we are probably not going to want to be like these like big cake decorators, and you can make a pine cone like a rose, and a rose takes like months to learn, and you're going to be frustrated, and making all the flowers. I mean, that's like a lot of classes, and so you want to have fun, and you're making the centerpiece. And I always say you cannot make a flower ugly. So now we're going to decorate it. So this is cedar. You can get these at any florist shop, pretty much around, and it's cleaned and it's nice. You can also go outside and pick it, wash it, and use it, from your garden. Yeah. Now the cedar this thing with the cedar is you want to put it on right before you serve it, because that's why no one wants to win this one, because I did this one yesterday. The cedar will put like a flavor into the chocolate, so you want to use it sparingly. One thing that you can do is just get like a little bit of saran wrap or something and just kind of put that in there, just because that's the one thing that I noticed about it. So I just kind of like lay it in there. I try not to really shove it, because it's really a fun Christmassy thing. You can the same with pine. So I just kind of use it real sparingly, just to kind of give it a little bit of color. I would do it right before I put it on my Christmas table. Just So you'll have it, you would have it all at this part. You'd have all your flowers, in a vase or whatever. And then, right before everyone was coming, I'd quick get my flowers on there and put it on the centerpiece. And it's going to be fine for a couple hours. So whoever wins this, eat it right away.
Could you use, you can get plastics.
Yeah.
And if you use plastic, you could put that on it.
And some of that you can't even tell. I mean, and a lot of bakeries do this. You can, and it's so beautiful. Now these pine cones, you can, these came from a florist. They do like extra stuff to it, but I've also seen people just go get them from the yard, like back in the fall. You want to plan ahead and then just put them in a bag and you dry them and they shake them or something and clean them up and then they put them in there. I think you can buy these also like at a like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. You just kind of put them. You just get to be creative here. Just put them wherever you want. And then we have the flowers. I was like the white, pink, the white, red, or the pink. And so we have some like peppermint carnations here. And of course, silk flowers work too. When you do frosting flowers, it's hard to get this kind of height on a flower though. And you just kind of get to be creative. I would say you can't make a flower ugly, so just don't worry about where you're putting it. It's flour, it's not going to be ugly. And it's going to be fine. And then we have a couple leaves of holly. Now with the holly, you actually can probably get a deal from if you go to the florist because you don't want the berries. The berries on the holly are not edible. So I'm going to show you my cheater trick for berries. And just kind of putting your stuff in there. And then for the berries, these are just fresh cranberries. So you can get that pop of color without, you wouldn't want someone to eat a holly berry. Just kind of put your berries on there. And they're just cranberries.
What about red hots, would they?
They sure would. There you go. Let's see. Oh, our mushrooms. That's right. No. And then we just kind of place them. Just kind of put them in there. Let's see. Put them out in front here. All right. Thank you.